On October 12, 1992, a missing person report was filed with the Hazel Creek County Police Department in New Mexico for a 6-year-old girl named Leslie Livingston. The report was filed by her mother, Karen Livingston, a 34-year-old local resident who works as a librarian assistant at the school library. According to her, the girl went for a walk in the yard around 4:30 p.m. and she has not seen her since. A search of the area around the house and the backyard yielded no results. Karen claimed that she was distracted for just 10 minutes, and when she came out onto the porch, the child was gone. The Livingstons' house was located on the outskirts of a small town. Around it were rare private houses, thickets of bushes, and a dry ravine where children often ran to play. An initial inspection of the area yielded nothing. Local police, represented by officers Martinez and Harding, began the standard procedure, questioning neighbors, going around yards, searching the immediate vicinity. Neighbors, including an elderly couple across the street and a single man living diagonally across the street, reported not seeing the girl that day. However, one teenager playing basketball a block down said he saw a little girl in pink walking along the road around 5 p.m. She was indeed wearing a pink dress, her mother confirmed. Volunteers and a dog handler from a neighboring district were brought in to help with the search. They examined the ravine, looked at the sewers, checked the old bus stop, and all abandoned buildings within a kilometer. There was no trace of Leslie. The police distributed descriptions in the district and on the local news. Already on the third day after her disappearance, during a second inspection of the house, investigators noticed some peculiarities in Karen's behavior. The video recording from the camera of one of the volunteers who was filming the search process shows that the woman is not demonstrating typical motherly behavior. She does not actively participate in the search, spends a lot of time inside the house, and avoids communicating with other parents. Police officers noted that Karen never once made an emotional request to the public, as often happens in cases of missing children. However, no charges were brought at this stage. The following week brought no new information. The investigation proceeded in several directions. Versions of abduction, accident, leaving home were considered. Karen was called in for a second interrogation. This time, the woman's behavior seemed even stranger to investigator Harding. She answered monotonously, got confused about time, and claimed to suffer from cognitive blackouts. When asked if Leslie could have left on her own, Karen only shrugged. The interrogation lasted less than an hour, after which the woman was released. While the search was ongoing, a court order was issued to search the home. During the search, investigators found suspicious items in Karen's bedroom: baby hair clips, socks, an album of Leslie's photographs, and a diary containing entries that defied rational explanation. In several places, Karen wrote that her daughter is her mirror. She is the essence of her body, and even if she disappears, so will I. Two fragments particularly concerned the investigators. I can't let her go. I can still feel her inside me. It was especially hot today. She wanted to go outside again. I didn't let her. I can't lose her completely. These recordings did not contain direct threats or confessions, but coupled with the woman's erratic behavior and the lack of traces of the girl, they raised serious doubts. On the fourth day of the investigation, the police's attention was drawn to the Livingstons' basement. It was locked with an internal bolt, to which Karen could not find the key, explaining that she had not been down there for a long time. Investigators opened the door. The basement was a standard room used for storage: old furniture, boxes of books, and cans of food. However, in the corner, behind several shelves, there was a closed chest with metal clasps. Inside, they found doll dresses, children's toys, and a small rubber mattress covered in stains. A forensic scientist was called in. Preliminary testing showed biological traces, including blood. Later tests confirmed that the blood belonged to the child. Karen herself could not explain the presence of these items and said that she did not remember where they came from. Meanwhile, the police began to consider the girl's mother as a prime suspect. That same day, Karen was arrested on suspicion of involvement in the child's disappearance. Her home was guarded, and a thorough collection of evidence began. The next task for investigators was to establish what exactly happened in the Livingston home on the day of the girl's disappearance and why the mother avoided cooperating with the police. After her arrest, Karen Livingston was placed in the Sandoval County Detention Center. For the first 2 days, she was virtually uncooperative with detectives, refusing to eat and repeating the same phrase, "I didn't kill her, she's still here." Her condition was assessed as unstable, and a forensic psychiatrist was brought in. An examination the following day found signs of disorientation, but no signs of acute psychosis. However, the specialist recommended that the woman's behavior be monitored while in isolation. Interviews with neighbors continued. Several residents of the street reported that Karen often did not allow her daughter to play with other children, restricted her movements, was overprotective, and sometimes intrusive. Some mentioned that Karen would abruptly interrupt her daughter's play outside, taking her home without explanation. One neighbor, Robert Lake, claimed to have once seen Karen peeking at Leslie while she was washing herself in the wading pool outside. These allegations were recorded, but there was no evidence to support them. On the 6th day after the girl's disappearance, Karen Livingston made a partial confession. During an interrogation that lasted more than 2 hours, she stated the following: "I didn't want her to grow up. You don't understand. When she was around, everything was right. She was me. I wanted her to always be mine, not a stranger. I won't let anyone touch her, not even her." Investigator Harding recorded that throughout the interrogation, the woman spoke in a restrained manner, without tears or noticeable emotion. Her speech was choppy, with repetitions and deviations from the topic. When asked directly what had happened to Leslie, she evaded the answer several times, claiming that the girl is not dead, just inside. In parallel, forensic examinations of the basement contents continued. Traces of Leslie's DNA were found on a mattress. Karen's notes also contained fragments dated a month before her disappearance, which mentioned, "Leslie wants more space. She wants to go. I can't let that happen." Of particular interest was the mention of the phrase, "My body should be her home." The investigation regarded this as a potential indication of sexualized actions towards her daughter. Child psychiatrists who studied Karen's behavior concluded that the woman exhibited signs of severe attachment disorder and possible incestuous behavior within the context of pathological dependence on the child. However, the final conclusion remained with the forensic psychiatric examination. An interview with Karen's ex-husband, Michael Livingston, provided additional details. He lived in Arizona and had little contact with his daughter. According to him, Karen was always clingy, especially in matters of her body. He claimed that it was because of his wife's disturbing behavior that he insisted on a divorce when Leslie was 2. He also noted that Karen forbade the girl from seeing other relatives, including her paternal grandmother. Investigators began studying the materials on Karen's home computer. They found search queries made several months before her disappearance. Is it possible to sleep with a child in the same bed after 5 years? Incestuous feelings, psychiatry, prohibition of physical intimacy with daughter. This data formed the basis for the charge of corruption of a minor. While the investigation was ongoing, the search for Leslie's body continued. Sniffer dogs were used. Drainage ditches and abandoned areas were searched. No results. Suspicions grew that the body had been hidden or destroyed. The police considered the possibility that the girl could have been strangled and then hidden in an inaccessible place. However, there was still no direct evidence of murder. Karen Livingston changed her story once again, now claiming that the girl went into the night and added, "I held her for a long time, then it became quiet, but I don't remember how it became completely dark. She was warm and then light." The Forensic Psychiatric Commission concluded that Karen could have been aware of her actions at the time of the possible crime, despite the presence of signs of a broken attachment and emotional dependence. Her confession and the evidence found allowed for the formation of a preliminary charge under the article on the murder of a minor, as well as indecent acts against a child. The next task of the investigation is to establish where the girl's body is and how the criminal scheme was implemented. In the absence of direct material evidence, the construction of the accusation required a careful reconstruction of events and an analysis of the suspect's behavioral anomalies. On October 18, 1992, 6 days after Karen Livingston was arrested, Sandoval County police officers received an anonymous tip. An anonymous female voice said, "Check the dumpster behind the school. That's where all the leftovers are." The call was recorded and immediately responded to. The dumpster in question was located 400 yards from the Livingston home, on the edge of the elementary school where Karen worked as a librarian assistant. A plastic bag with a thick insulating wrap was indeed found in the container. The contents of the bag were the partially decomposed remains of a child. The forensic experts who arrived at the scene determined that the body had been partially dismembered. The bones had been carefully separated from the soft tissue, and the body parts were wrapped in fabric similar to fragments of bed linen. The presence of fibers matching the samples seized from Karen's home confirmed the connection of the find to the suspect's place of residence. DNA analysis conclusively established that the remains belonged to Leslie Livingston. Based on the find, an official charge of murder was issued. At the same time, the investigation stepped up the collection of additional evidence. Repeated interrogations were conducted with employees of the school where Karen worked. One of her colleagues, Emma Rogers, said that several weeks before the girl's disappearance, Karen frightened her with strange conversations about how children leave their mothers too quickly and that daughters should not become women. A video recording from the school's surveillance cameras was also found, which showed Karen crossing the school grounds at night around 2:40 a.m. on October 14th and heading toward the dumpster. She was holding a bag in her hands and walking quickly, looking around. This confirmed the investigators' version that it was she who had thrown out the girl's body. Karen was called in for a second interrogation, during which she was shown the video recording. The woman responded by stating that she didn't remember leaving the house, but did not deny that it was her in the video. Investigators began reconstructing the chronology of events based on all the data collected. According to the analysis, the key events occurred on October 12th. Karen likely acted in the evening after the girl, in her words, disobeyed and expressed a desire to go play with the neighbors. This caused a sharp attack of jealousy in the mother. Investigators suggested that at this point, Karen may have made a decision that had previously existed at the level of obsessive thoughts to get rid of her daughter so as not to lose her emotionally. According to her diary entries and interviews with psychiatrists, Karen suffered from a pathological dependency that bore the hallmarks of eroticized attachment. This condition is often accompanied by a severe distortion of the perception of boundaries between oneself and the object of attachment, especially if it is a close relative. This explained both Leslie's isolation from the outside world and her mother's desire to hold her in the literal sense. Investigators assumed that the murder was committed by improvised means, strangulation, or medication, since there were no signs of forced entry or serious injuries on the remains. According to the forensic report, death was caused by asphyxia. Weak pressure marks were found on the child's neck, characteristic of soft strangulation, possibly with a pillow. Karen's next steps likely included storing the body in the basement of the house, as indicated by stains on the mattress that matched the secretions found on the body. The body remained in the basement for 2 days, after which she carried the remains out in a bag at night and threw them in a dumpster. Further investigation revealed that in the weeks before the crime, Karen had been interested in baby drowsiness products and had visited websites discussing topics related to safe sleeping and bed sharing. Although these actions were not criminal in themselves, in the context of the subsequent crime, they strengthened the case. After new evidence was presented, Karen's defense requested a psychiatric examination as part of the criminal case. The experts invited by the prosecution and defense came to different conclusions. Some pointed to the possibility of sanity, others to a severe personality disorder bordering on psychosis. However, the court decided to conduct an inpatient examination at a federal psychiatric clinic in order to obtain a final conclusion before the hearing on the merits. Thus, by the end of October 1992, the investigation had at its disposal the confirmed remains of the victim, a confession from the suspect, materials indicating an unstable mental state, and a chronologically constructed picture of the crime committed. The question before the court was the following: to what extent could Karen Livingston be aware of her actions at the time of the crime, and what responsibility should she bear? The trial of Karen Livingston began on February 17, 1993, in the U.S. District Court of New Mexico. The trial was closed due to the nature of the case and the age of the victim. The defendant was found fit to appear at the trial according to the court, despite her continued observation by specialists. At the preliminary hearing, the defense filed a motion to reclassify the case as involuntary manslaughter due to mental confusion, citing the diagnosis made by the inpatient psychiatric evaluation. However, the judge denied the motion, leaving the charge of intentional homicide of a minor with sexualized actions. The hearing focused on expert testimony. A psychiatrist who saw Karen for 45 days in a clinical setting reported that she had an identity disorder, accompanied by severe addiction and a distorted sense of bodily boundaries. The medical report included the following wording: the patient experienced an obsessive need to maintain physical and emotional closeness with her daughter, accompanied by signs of eroticized dependence. At the same time, she retained a partial ability to understand the consequences of her actions, especially at the time of hiding the body and interacting with the police. That assessment was key to the prosecution's case. The expert confirmed that Karen knew what she was doing, even though she was in an altered emotional state. The prosecution, District Attorney Jane Robards, focused the jury's attention on the defendant's consistent actions after her daughter's death: hiding the body, moving the package at night, lying to police, trying to make the disappearance look like a kidnapping. All of these steps, she argued, pointed to a deliberate strategy to evade responsibility. The defense, on the other hand, built a defense based on pathological dependence and an inability to comprehend the daughter's separateness as a person. Defense lawyer Clark Milner stated in his opening statement, "This is not a story of calculation or cruelty. This is the story of a woman who was destroyed by her own internal division. She did not kill with intent. She was trying to hold on to what she perceived as part of herself." The key moment of the hearing was the reading of Karen's personal diaries, which were included in the case. They described scenes that caused alarm in the room. For example, "When she cuddles with me, I feel calm. I want us to be one body. I know it's wrong, but is it worse than the cold of others?" The prosecution insisted that the recordings reflected the gradual development of a dangerous fantasy that ended in its realization. The defense argued that this was merely a manifestation of mania and loss of contact with reality, characteristic of mental disorders. Witnesses also spoke. Among them was a social worker who once visited Karen's home in response to a neighbor's complaint about excessive shouting. No violations were found at the time, but according to the witness, the mother and daughter were behaving unusually close. The girl would not leave her mother's side, and Karen herself was withdrawn and avoided eye contact. The neighbor's testimony reinforced the impression of isolation. No one knew what Karen did outside the home, and no one had seen visitors. Even at the school where she worked, colleagues noted her wary behavior and refusal to participate in joint activities. Teachers repeatedly expressed concern that the girl had virtually no contact with other children. One of the last witnesses was the forensic expert who conducted the autopsy. He confirmed that the child's death was caused by mechanical asphyxia and that the marks on the body indicated pressure from an object, not hands. No signs of physical violence of a sexual nature were found, but several experts expressed the opinion that sexualized behavior could have been psychological rather than physical. This became a subject of separate discussion between the parties, since the possibility of bringing additional charges depended on it. Karen Livingston made no public statements during the trial. The judge allowed her to testify behind closed doors. At that hearing, she admitted that she held her daughter's breath when she pushed her away and that she didn't want her to go away. She cried but spoke calmly. The prosecution interpreted this testimony as an admission of intentional strangulation, accompanied by awareness of what was happening. By the end of the trial, the jury had a choice: find Karen guilty of premeditated murder, manslaughter due to mental instability, or acquit her on the grounds of insanity. The trial lasted a total of 23 days. The jury's decision was expected within the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, public debate was intensifying about the boundaries of parental custody, psychiatric evaluation, and the legal consequences of psychologically abnormal behavior that is not always obvious to others. The jury's verdict was announced on March 12, 1993, in the Rio Rancho County courtroom. After deliberating for 3 days, the 12-member panel, which included employees, retirees, teachers, and a former nurse, came to a unanimous verdict to find Karen Livingston guilty of intentional homicide of a minor, with the additional charge of committed by a person in an emotionally dependent state. The charge of sexually abusing her daughter was ultimately dropped from the verdict because the court found that the evidence did not allow the actions to be classified as physical abuse of a sexual nature. Judge Morton Westbrook in sentencing, said the case was one of the most disturbing in his experience and that the lines between mental disorder and conscious action were thin but sufficient to establish guilt. The defendant was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of applying for parole after 35 years. She was also ordered to be under lifelong supervision by the Psychiatric Service of the Ministry of Justice. Karen showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read out. She sat with her head down, not saying a word. Defense lawyer Clark Milner told reporters he intended to appeal, citing insufficiencies in the medical evidence taken into account and the disproportionate nature of the sentence in the context of the defendant's mental disorder.